forgive me for this trap shit. Sergeant Smack making backflip. Telly Hank did with the action. With the Vato speaking Spanish. Frank Matthews, how I vanish. Poof. Came back like I'm King Tut. Gold BBS is on a beamer. When Fat Cat was 10 queens up. Ball off the profit, not the re-up. Fly like Puerto Rican Jesus. Uptown like I'm Baby Maine. Just caught a touchdown from the Bay.
And rest in peace to my man Tony Montana. And rest in peace to my man Tony Montana. And rest in peace to my man Tony Montana. Hey yo, I'm out, word is born. This shit is real.
One of them is Tony Montana. Rest in peace. Tony Montana was definitely that dude. From the street to the island. But yeah, man. So like I said, I met Tony at Morris High School. At the same place where I met, Joe and shit. And Tone was always destined to be a G. He was always looking up to the older OGs. And he would always tell me, Charlie, I'm going there, I'm going there. And your boy did. Tone's definitely a hood legend. He put in the crazy work. He got snatched up for a body, laid up on Rikers Island. I think it was like about a year and a half. Went to trial and beat the body. Your boy Tone beat the body. Not too many fools can say that they beat a murder at trial. He went to trial and took it. Another fact about Tone. Those that know. And they know that your boy Tone Montana did not do the body that they arrested him for. That's right, the boy was straight innocent. He might have done some other shit, you know what I mean? But for the one he got arrested for, those that know, that was not Tone's body. It was somebody else's body.
Candidate Ronald Reagan, the South Bronx, August 1980.
I'm trying to tell you, I can't do a damn thing for you if I don't get elected.
And a nagging question that occurred to us is represented by a New York neighborhood, which has long been a reproach to the nation. But the South Bronx is trying to rise from the ashes. It is a battle to do so. And Ed Rabel spent last week in the battle zone. It was like the moon now, nothing but minerals. Buildings had collapsed. Their wood had been consumed and their stones had crashed down. Some walls still stood, but windows and roofs were gone, and there was nothing inside but ashes and dollops of melted glass. That is Kurt Vonnegut's description of Dresden after its destruction by American bombers in February 1945. But this is the South Bronx, February 1981. Destroyed by other Americans. Life here is hard. The battle to survive is desperate. The outcome by no means certain. Almost every week is a bad week for the people of the South Bronx, who are mostly black and Puerto Rican. Last week was an exception. It was worse.
He calls it Fort Apache.
Hollywood's version of the South Bronx started playing at theaters nearly everywhere. Robert Roman took it personally.
Because they made black and Puerto Rican people look like pimps, hustlers, hoes, you know. That's not what it's all about.
Fort Apache, the Bronx. The fuse has been lit.
They made us look like a cesspool down here.
In Fat Joe's book, The Book of Jose, he explains how himself, New York One reporter Dean Meminger, and Anthony Tony Montana Crespo would be best friends growing up. Kinda explained them like the Three Musketeers. It's crazy how people that seem like they was on the same path end up in three different destinations. We here to tell you about the ones that didn't make it out. Yo, what up though? It's your ace Popalot. Salute the almighty MOBB. Now, this story is going to take place in the Bronx circa the 1980s and the early 1990s. Now, if anybody knows the Bronx, or New York City for that matter, and are old enough or willing to do research, they would see that New York City was one of the most dangerous places in the world at that time. So in the 1980s, in every decade except for 4, New York City would average over 2,000 homicides. And even in 2 of those 4 years where it didn't have 2,000 homicides, according to Disaster Center, in 1983, they still had 1,958 homicides. And in 1986, they still would amass 1,907 homicides. So right on the cusp of that number 2,000. And in 1991, 92, and 93, each of those years was higher than any year in the 1980s. So just to give you a climate of the city at that time, it was violent. In the Bronx at that time, specifically in the 1980s, was definitely one of the most wildest places, where half of the city's buildings burnt down. The shit was so out of control, they would end up calling that specific time the Decade of Fire. So just think about taking that and adding the crack epidemic that would ravage New York City, as well as a lot of other urban cities across the nation. Now, some big players would end up emerging from all of that smoke. And one of those players was Anthony Tony Montana Crespo. He would grow up in forest houses in the Bronx. A big, but not the hugest projects. It would consist of 15 buildings, 9, 10, and 14 stories tall. And that's the place where he would meet and form a long friendship with a kid by the name of Joey Cartagena, who we would grow to know as Fat Joe. The two would reside in the same building in said housing project. And according to Fat Joe, in his book, The Book of Jose, that I referenced earlier, in which he almost has an entire chapter, chapter 4, about Anthony Tony Montana Crespo, titled The Real Life Tony Montana. Now, in the efforts not to get people confused, there were 2 Tony Montanas in New York City at that time. They would have one from Queens, Tommy Tony Montana Mickens, who 50 would rap about on the Ghetto Quran, and we have covered on this channel. Then you have Anthony Tony Montana Crespo, or Tone Montana, who has also been referenced by Fat Joe, especially in his early on music, like his first project, Represent. The 2 would go on to attend Morris High School, located in the Melrose neighborhood of the South Bronx, where the crew would start the formulation of what will be known as the Terror Squad, meeting another original member of the group, Charlie Rock LD. Now, with the drug craze that was going on, not only in the South Bronx, but in America at that time, the crew would end up finding themselves in that game. And while stories would be told, even Fat Joe would admit himself to being a small-time drug dealer, the same case could not be said with Anthony Tony Montana Crespo, as he would rise in the drug game. But unlike most hustlers who were specifically into the hustling game at that time, or that was their lane, Tone Montana was said to be into everything: drug dealing, extortion, and even murder. Now, according to Charlie Rock LD, he would talk about spending some time on Rikers Island, specifically in C-74, with Tone Montana when Tone Montana was fighting the murder case. Now, in a feat not often seen, especially in New York City, he would go on and take the body to trial and end up beating it. Now, Charlie Rock LD would go on to say about the situation that it wasn't even Tone's body that he was fighting, pretty much saying, if you know, you know. Nonetheless, he would end up beating that body and end up back on the streets. And by all accounts, it seems like his life was wild from the start, with only a few smooth points. Now, everybody that explains him or describes him, one of the first things that they talk about is how he was a ladies' man. Fat Joe referenced that in his book often, and Charlie Rock LD explains in an interview how he was one of the main ladies' man, or he can get the lady that nobody could get, pretty much saying he was the Papi Chulo of the crew. Fat Joe would talk about going to Tone's apartment early on in life and seeing and hearing Tone's father sing, even saying that he went to shows with Tone watching his father sing, saying that in his book to say that Tone had that same ability and he would sometimes use it on the women. And though it's not a lot published about him or said about him, especially in this day and time, but everybody that was there, and even OGs that I talked to offline, all stamped Tone Montana as one of those names that was coming out of the Bronx, like Chicky or Boy George. But as Fat Joe would begin his career as a rap star, and Dean Meminger would go on to forge his career as a reporter for New York One, Anthony Tone Montana Crespo would specialize in the streets, and he would end up meeting his demise somewhere around 1991, 92, or 93, not specific on the year, and the details of his death is even sketchy. It was said that Tone Montana, who was heavily into street shit, would always have on a bulletproof vest. But according to several sources, on the night of his murder, he would end up pulling up to his residence, beeping his horn for his wife to open up the car garage, when from the shadows, suspects would emerge and end up shooting him multiple times. According to some people, they said it was 8 times in the chest, Charlie Rock, LD being one of those sources. But to conflict that, I did see where some criminologists, father and son team, James B. O'Kane and James M. O'Kane, would write an article covering murals of people that have been murdered, saying about Tone Montana's mural. This murder mural, found by James B. O'Kane on a playground in the Washington Avenue housing projects in the Bronx, honors the memory of a 19-year-old gang member who was shot in the head multiple times. His street name was Tony Montana, after the fictional drug lord who was portrayed by Al Pacino in the movie Scarface, going on to say it was one of the most moving murals that he has found. It was quite artistic, he said. It also depicts the reality that the price tag on life can be very low there. Now, Charlie Rock would explain a situation where he was caught without a vest, saying that he was in some kind of a relationship with a female by the name of Angie, who always gave him static about being in the streets. And before going in the house, he possibly might have took that vest off and tucked what was said to be a Mac 11 that was apparently or allegedly found under his driver's seat. But with a lot of these cases, who knows how that situation really played out. But y'all make sure y'all hit the red bell and subscribe button right under this video so y'all know when this real trill spill shit is dropping. Y'all get in the comment box. Y'all run it up. If any of y'all was there at that time, y'all definitely get in the comment box. If y'all was in the Bronx when it was burning, we definitely need to hear from y'all. Y'all know anything about Tony Montana? Y'all hit that comment box below. Y'all let me know what cities I need to go to, what stories I need to tell, what I missed, what I got wrong, what gangsters I have not covered yet. Y'all tap in with your ace directly. Instagram, Twitter, POP_A_LOT. And until the next time, y'all know the rundown. Salute the almighty MOBB.